Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Classroom to Corner Office, a podcast for to-be professionals and those considering career shifts to understand how to navigate these challenges with advice from those that have lived it, both the good and the bad. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Vincent Mumford, currently serving as a department chair and a faculty member at an institution of higher education. So, Dr. Mumford, thank you for joining us today to provide your wisdom, thoughts, and advice.
Well, Chris, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be invited on to be a guest of yours. Thank you.
The privilege is definitely all mine based on our interactions in the past and full disclosure, some of the advice and wisdom you've shared with me along the way. So I am more than grateful as well. I did want to start out today, Dr. Mumford, and just to inquire right off the bat, with your current role as a department chair and serving as a faculty member, what does that day-to-day look like, balancing the faculty role with those administrative duties? I'm sure that there's some days where that is a handful.
It really is a handful, but it's also kind of a labor of love. I've watched you in your career, and I've seen how you have found a way to find something that you love doing. This is no different, but it is a handful because as a department chair, you really are in the middle. You have bosses that you report to who are telling you what they want done, and you have faculty members who are in essence, your peers. So you can't really tell them, and make them do anything. So, I just try to use, whatever influence I have to get the things done that I need to get done. But certainly, it is sometimes it's been referred to as like trying to herd cats.
100%. That is definitely something that I observe, right, in my day to day as well, serving as a faculty member. So I fully understand through my own observations what that means. For you, having that peer to peer relationship while also serving in that administrative role, what have you done along the way to build those relationships in a way when something needs to get done, you can go to those people and trust in them and they can trust in you that you're not asking them to do something that is unimportant and you also trusting that it will get done as it should?
Well, the first thing I try to do is I try to get to know. I make it a point to get to know each person on a personal level. So it becomes more than just, passing ships at work, but I learned something about their actual life. Like I know you love golf, and we didn't even work in the same unit, but I had learned about your passion for golf. So I try to learn some things about people, other than just the day-to-day drudgery of work, and build some type of rapport and relationship with them. And also, I don't try, I actually do. I wouldn't ask anybody to do anything that I'm unwilling to do myself. So I try to lead from the front, as they say. So they see me doing it, out there doing it, as an example. In higher ed now, if you're not one of the if you're not one of the biggest brands, the state flagships, and you're not like, in places like the South where a lot of people are moving there, then you might have some enrollment challenges. And so we certainly have that here in the Midwest. And so as faculty, we're taking on more and more roles with the recruiting process. And, so as I'm talking to students, I'm the first one to jump out there and say, hey, you know, I'll meet with the students personally, I'll meet with their families. I'll, do this after in between my classes, after work, on the weekends. And so faculty see that. And so there have been times where I had to, because of other obligations, I've had to ask somebody, hey, can you take on this additional responsibility? But because they saw my willingness to always do it first, they didn't hesitate to, even though it may not have been at a convenient time for them, but they were happy to step in because they saw, hey, he's always doing it.
Yeah, and looking back at your career journey, right? You've worked in intercollegiate athletics, you've obviously the faculty, and now you also serve an administrative role in academia. And previously, you've been in administrative roles and in more recruitment centered departments. Along the way, what are some of the skills that you have acquired, learned, or realized have been beneficial for you to be able to transition in from these different areas and still find success?
Probably the number one skill is a skill that I began to learn as my time in sports
Mhm.
is that you don't accomplish anything by yourself. And so, in order to accomplish anything meaningful, it's done with and through other people. And so always keeping that at the center and realizing that if we're going to do anything, we have to do it together. That old saying is there's no I in team except if you're Kobe Bryant. And you remember what he said, there's an I in win. But no, so recognizing that from early on and then probably a meeting that had there are always these moments in life that have an impact on you. A moment that had a really big impact on me when I was a young athletic director, just starting out my career. And I was meeting with vice president of Pepsi and trying to get them to be a sponsor of our program. And somehow the conversation divulged into talking about leadership. And he took out an organizational chart. I don't know why he carried it around in his bag, but he took out an organizational chart and he showed me, all the people that reported to him. He was at the top, and all the people, how organizational chart looks, kind of like
Yeah.
you know. And so then the thing that he did after that, Chris, made all the difference in my life afterwards. He took that organizational chart and he completely flipped it upside down and he said, "This is me." And for that was one of those, aha moments. He was the vice president of a big region, and yet he viewed his position as he was to serve everybody in his organization. So ever since then, I've tried to adopt those principles and become what they refer to, I didn't know at the time, but now a servant leader that I see my role is trying to serve, the people that I work with and to support them. And hopefully if I can do that well enough, then that'll drive success in the organization.
Right, and that is a mentality, right? Not everybody, has that realization maybe as early in their career as you did. So you've had a lot of time to develop that, massage that into your own personal leadership style, team building style. So you've had, the ability to build teams in various roles you've had in the past. What do you look for or what are you searching for whenever you try to build a team? Are there certain personalities or a mixture of people, personalities, experiences, and skills? Or is it just best person up and available at that time that you look for?
Well, I mean, no, if we're both sports people, we both like sports.
Yep.
And we all know that what makes great coaches are good, you have talent.
Hmm.
Talent makes great coaches. But I've had the opportunity to do some amazing things in my life. One of those was I had the opportunity to work at a company called the Walt Disney World, and I worked in something called the Disney Institute, and so learned a lot about leadership through that experience. Learned a lot about teamwork and things like that. And so, what I look for, Chris, is I look for someone with the right attitude. And as I've evolved and matured a lot, that's what I try to that's the lesson I try to provide to my students now that the two most important things are attitude and effort. And why attitude and effort? Because we live in a complex world and things will come at you on a daily basis. A lot of those things are outside of your control. But the two things that you absolutely can control are your attitude and your effort. And I think those things go a long way in being a part of any team.
Yeah, that's 100%. And I've been in hiring manager roles and right, the skills and the experience and the education are a gatekeeper in the end. But, how you can demonstrate that attitude and your willingness to put forth effort, go that little bit of an extra mile. It doesn't even have to be a mile, right? Just some of those extra steps and how you can translate that into application materials as well as within an interview is invaluable to not just securing the interview, but getting a job. and getting an opportunity. So that's definitely great advice. So you've worked in athletics, worked in sports. I like to focus in on this with a question of, what did working in sports teach you about performance, pressure, and teamwork that you think many early career professionals completely underestimate and don't understand the value?
Well, uh, working in sport definitely teaches you that you're in an industry in sport that's not your typical 9 to 5. So, and anybody who works in sport, if you don't understand it initially, you soon come to realize that you are really in the entertainment business, and that the times that you will have to work are when everybody else does not have to work. And so that means, nights, weekends, those are the time that sport events occur. And so, you just have to understand that and be willing to, say, hey, this is something that I love to do. And this is what it entails. And just do it with, as I said earlier, attitude and effort, do it to the best of your ability. That's one of the things that I learned early on.
And that's right. That attitude and effort is translatable. It's a transferable. It's not even say if it's a skill. That's just a transferable attitude, right? Right there to be able to do that. So with all of these transitions from sport to academia, I also know that, and we'll get into this, you do some nonprofit work as well. What has kind of prompted some of those transitions? Was that planned transition, or was that just exploring new spaces? And how have you prepared yourself professionally and mentally to make those not leaps, but those transitions in your professional life?
That's a great question. And for the longest time, and I'd be less than honest, Chris, if I didn't say to you, my original plan is not how life turned out. We can quote the great fighter Mike Tyson that says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yep.
But my original plan was pretty simple. I think that people have a tendency to dream as far as they can see. And so growing up, I knew that I loved this thing called sport. I mean, absolutely had a passion for it, did it every day, and was only limited by, like so many people, I had to go in the house when the light came on. That was the only rule. Like, I had to be in the house when the street light came on. Otherwise, I would continue to play sports indefinitely. I just had a burning passion, a burning desire about this thing called sport. And so everything that I've done in my life has been accomplished to that has been related to that passion. Now it shifted along the way. Initially, I thought that because the people that I saw early on were my coaches and teachers, you can only dream as far as you can see. I thought that I was going to be a teacher and a coach. And my teachers and coaches were making, 50 grand. And so that was my life stream, to teach and coach and make 50 grand. That was my dream. That's as far as I could see. That was
Right.
in my those are the people that I met along the way in high school. And but at every step of the journey, I've had a guardian angel. I call them guardian angels. These are people that said, "Hey, you know, kind of like what I've watched you do. It's kind of like, hey, are you aware of these opportunities?" So, as an example, uh, I just I thought I know I love sports. Well, what can you do with sports? Well, I love playing, so I can be a coach at the high school level. I can be a teacher because my physical education teacher. The only reason that I even chose physical education, Chris, was because my physical education teacher in high school let me lead the classes. That's the only reason. I could have gone into med school, and I almost did go into sports medicine, but the program was out of state, and my mom told me I had two choices for my college choice, not like it is now. I could go in state or in state, and you caught that.
Yep.
So, but East Carolina was off the table at that point. But so, you know, so I had a major immediately. I didn't need to think about anything. I knew what I was going to do. and I was going to get this great job being a high school teacher and coach and make 50 grand eventually and live my best life. And then as I was about to graduate from undergraduate, one of my teachers said, "Hey, there's this thing called collegiate sports administration, what's known today as sport management. That's something you could do." And I'm thinking, really? I can work in college sports? I didn't even know that was possible. And so my first job out of college, my first job was uh, working intercollegiate athletics. And so that's how I got my start. And then, so of course, like everybody, back in the day, it was common to work at one place for 30 years and retire and get a gold watch.
Yep.
Then I thought that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna work and do the same thing. And as a matter of fact, Chris, I look back on it, I was so young and green. When I was a young athletic director, I remember the vice president, who was my supervisor, came up to me and said, "Hey, you're doing a good job with the athletic program. I'd like you to take on more areas, maybe like admissions and oversee these different areas, admissions and things like that." And I'm like, "No, I just want to be athletic director. I'm good." If I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't have said that to my boss, who was the vice president. But I was locked in. I knew what I wanted to do. And then, at each step, like I said, I knew that I wanted to grow into the roles. And so I knew it was important to get additional degrees. And so I got my master's and then my doctorate degree. And when I was finishing up my doctorate degree, the again, guardian angel, I met a dean at a university, and they said, "Hey, I'm looking for someone to." I was at a conference. "Hey, I'm looking for someone to help and help me develop. I want to develop a program in sport leadership." And I was like, "Well, what's sport leadership?" He was like, "Well, teaching people about sport." And I didn't pay him any attention at first, but like so many stories, there's always sometimes a tragedy. And probably one of the most defining moments of my career, Chris, is on this path, being an AD, loving every moment of it, working 15-hour days, absolutely loving it. But I lost my mom when uh, she was only 56 years old. And I thought we had, so much time,
Mhm.
like I just never thought that would happen. And I thought we had so much time. And there's some things that she told me that she wanted to do, she wanted us to do. And I just thought we had time. And at that moment, I realized that, hey, although you like doing this, there are things that are more important. And so that's when I took the dean up on the offer to become a college professor. But before I said, "Hey, well, what?" Because I'd never thought about being a college professor. And I said, "Well, what does a college professor do?" And Chris, when she told me that they talked about sport, I said, "You got to be kidding me. That I love sports, and there's a job where I can talk to young people, the next generation, about sports? That can't be real." And then I asked her, "Hey, well, where I'd never heard of your university. Where is it?" And she told me it was in Orlando. And growing up as a kid, I've always been a fan of Disney. Always been a fan. I used to watch The Wonderful World of Disney. Never had a chance to go to Disney World at that point in time in my career. But when she said that, I don't know if you've ever watched Charlie Brown show. Well, all I heard was wah 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 wah. Because I was focused on, okay, this is Disney World. I'm going to get to go to Disney World, and so became a college professor. And it's been a great journey helping the next generation pursue their passion, like I was able to pursue mine with sport, helping
Yeah.
them find careers in sports.
Yeah, and that's I mean, obviously supporting the next generation of the workforce as well as in every other way because just because this group of, to be graduates have that interest in sport, they like you may find a path that leads them in a totally different way. So, for you in the preparation of to be college graduates to enter the workforce or to expand their skills in the workforce, what are some of the we'll say the gaps that you think primarily exist in coaching students up to be ready to to take on those first full-time roles or to progress if they've had internships and other experiential learning opportunities? Where are some of those gaps that you observe?
Okay, another great question. Some of the gaps that I see are you're familiar with the NACE competencies, I know from your previous work
Yep.
that you're familiar with those. And so trying to prepare students, matching students with the competencies that employers are looking for. But, you know, students, and I really don't like talking about this because I think every generation say those students are so different.
Yep.
I've never believed that, but I think with technology, and with COVID, we are seeing something different. And as one example, communication is something I try to prepare students for. And I'll give you a specific example. As students prepare to enter the workforce, I often have conversations with them about the importance of their network and connecting with people once they do their internship. Uh, and so what I found recently is students will say something to me like, I reached out to them, but they never got back to me. And I said, hey, well, really? Okay, well tell me about this. And he said, I sent them a message on Instagram and I said, finally a light bulb went off. The people that are the people that are hiring the students are using different methods of communication, phone, email. The students communicate differently with each other. And so they, they think that that's appropriate, when they're trying to establish a career. And so just having those conversations. I mean, something happened recently that illustrated that. Last week, we put on a sport management leadership lecture series. And, I had asked the students, well, invite the athletic director to come and introduce the speaker and followed up with the students and yep, invited her. Um, and so something in me said, hey, just go and follow up. So I went to the AD's office and the AD said, nope, haven't heard from the students at all. To make a long story short, the students text the AD and said, hey, well, you can imagine the life of an athletic director at Division I level. They're looking for at least an email communication that documents and has, all of the information about the event, when it is, where it is, you know, what they're what they're being asked to do. Nope. Student thought it was appropriate. Simple text. Hey, so that's one example.
That's
Communication is
interesting.
big. Yeah.
And I will share that there have been times when either I'm working with students or having a discussion and they will say, "Oh, you think it's okay to text this person?" And it's, somebody in a position of authority or that has a title. And I'll say, "Wait, do you have their number?" And they'll say, "No, no, it's the one on the website." And I say, "That is an office line that is not going to receive a text message. So let's just take that off the table right now. You can call that number, but we're not going to text that number." Okay. So, and that is just a difference in a phone number to the next generation of the workforce is a number that you're going to text because they haven't known differently. And how many phone calls, traditional phone calls, have these students made in their life?
Exactly, exactly. They don't spend a lot of time making phone calls. They spend a lot of time, on their social media and texting. And so communication is just different. That's one of the biggest things that I notice. Just the difference in how students communicate versus how the employers are going to communicate with them.
Yeah. And you talked about the NACE competencies, which again is something that I have used, and still continue to use in the classroom, focusing especially in those first semesters and those first couple years on really instilling the value of communication, teamwork, and critical thought, right? Those are the three that I try to focus on early. And then, say if you continue to develop skills that allow you to be successful in these competencies, things like leadership will take care of themselves along the way. So, are there any other, we'll say, activities or strategies you use to help support the development of those competencies inside and outside the classroom?
Well, I always try to, it's kind of like a stress test, but I always try to put students in my classes. I utilize experiential learning where
Mhm.
I try to develop projects where they have to do more than just read about it or listen to me talk about it, but there's some aspect that they have to do. And so And in doing, I know that not only can I tell that they know how because they actually did it, but I've learned that students remember a lot better when they actually had to physically do something.
Yeah.
And so I try to connect, learning with actually doing so that through experiential learning, so that students get a better grasp. And I've had some amazing feedback from students once they've gotten the workforce, even with professional teams. I've had students report back that, because it's not just your graduates of your university, it's graduates from universities all around.
Yeah.
And I've had students say something like, well, I was working with students and they were from some of the flagship universities and bigger universities, but because we did a lot of these things in class, like go out and pursue sponsorships for an organization, I felt really comfortable in, just jumping right in once the employer asked us to go out and get sponsors, where some of the other students from some of these other schools, they have people in those roles.
Right.
Michigan has a lot of people that do this role. So a student doesn't necessarily get the same experience that they would get at a much smaller school where they're actually hands on. And so that's one of the things that I've noticed from my students too is they felt very comfortable developing these skills because they've actually had to do it while they were in our program and at our university.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point is while those flagships have a lot of networks and opportunities, the opportunities that exist in the smaller and the mid-sized institutions is with that faculty student relationship, as well as with the maybe some of the more flexibility that's provided within the classroom, when there that is maybe a primary focus, where at the larger research-based institutions that may not be the focus of some faculty in some courses and in some degree programs. So don't sell short the opportunity to go to a smaller or mid-sized school that does not have that flagship designation, because the value is still there. You just have to find it and take advantage of it.
I tell students that all the time. And one of to my surprise, when I tell them that, if you have an interest working in college sports, at least, there are far more Division 2 and Division 3 schools than there are Division 1. And I find that most students have no idea because Division 1 is what they see on TV.
Yeah.
And so they think that most college sports are Division 1 and even power schools. And once we get into it, they find out that they're going to have so many more opportunities at Division 2 and even Division 3 schools, but they weren't aware of that.
Yeah, and that's I mean, the program, the school I'm at, the students that are sport management majors have a required internship, and we have a a partnership with our athletic program, and there are typically at least 2 students each semester that are doing internships with the Division 2 athletic program across various sports, right? So they get the experience not just in a sport. They are at a soccer game one night doing something, and they're at a basketball game 2 weeks later at a volleyball match, and then sideline at a basketball game. So the experiential opportunities at these smaller schools is much greater than you may see at some other larger institutions. 100%.
I agree 100%. I remember I worked with someone who went to Florida State and studied sport management. And their experience was totally different than the experience you described. Because at Florida State, again, they have so many resources. They had people in all those roles. And so this student told me that although they studied sport management at a big brand, essentially they didn't get any of those the experiences that you just described because they were full-time people that did that. And so they didn't get any of that experience.
Yeah, and I'll share just something that so as part of being at a school that does have this partnership, I have thrown myself directly into it. I do stat entry for football games, basketball games, volleyball games. I'm right there on the sidelines, and the interns are sitting there, and I say, "Hey, I'm with you today. I'm stat calling, and you're at your entry. Let's get it done today." So I work alongside them, and I think that does create a good relationship, not just between me and the students, but between faculty and athletic department as well, that allow these partnerships continue to build. And again, the ultimate benefit is to the student themselves. So if I can, take a night or two a week, throughout most of the semester and be there alongside them, and it helps the greater cause, then that's time well spent to me.
Absolutely.
All right, Dr. Mumford, as we're starting to get kind of towards the end of our discussion here today, I'm going to ask you some wrap up questions. So, for you, what's a small, unglamorous skill? We've talked about attitude and effort. What do you think is more of a technical or a soft skill that gives people an outsized career advantage? So it outkicks their coverage, we'll say.
Oh, that's actually an easy one. And that's something that I learned from my mom. And I've always kept this little nugget with me. And I can recall before I went to college, she gave me she had a conversation, and she just told me that in life, you're gonna meet people who, you know, maybe went to better had an opportunity to go to better schools. Uh who may be bigger, stronger, and faster than you. But one thing that you can do is never let anybody outwork you. Be willing to work harder at what you do than anybody else. And that lesson has not only stuck with me, but it has been the difference is be willing to outwork people. And I think that if any young person adapted that, that would take them far. You've heard it called different things. You've heard the Mamba mentality.
Yeah,
I mean, it's no different. I mean, Kobe just, he developed a philosophy of he's just going to work harder than everybody. And by doing that, you know, it's just going to make him so much better because he just worked harder. But my mother told me that, before I went to college, just outwork people, you know. And so I remember being when I was a GA, just trying to find my way. But I would arrive in the office before you want to. This is how people are impressed. If you're a student and you arrive before the people that are actually getting paid to do the job and you stay after, and Chris, this is the absolute truth. The reason I got my first job in intercollegiate athletics is because the person who hired me said, "Hey, I was watching you when you were grad assistant." And he said, "I'd never seen anybody who beat the coaches in the office and stayed after they left." He said, "It was your work ethic that I recognized." And I was amazed because I didn't even know I was being watched. And so now that's something I tell students as well. And I'm pretty sure you do, is that you're always on an interview. Somebody's always watching you. And so always put your best foot forward. You never get a second chance to make a good first impression.
100%. And to that thought of the interview and everything, what for you, I mean, you've been in hiring manager roles and have had to make those decisions. What is a piece of advice that you would share with, we'll say, to be professionals that have limited interview experience to help prepare themselves to put that best foot forward if they get past that application screening to that interview, which may be their first fully professional interview that has something on the line?
Yeah. I would say use the resources. Like there's so many resources out there. I know what you did, but I'd literally just left a meeting probably an hour before we're meeting right now. And one of the presenters was our career center at the university. I mean, they do everything from mock interviews. Think about years ago, basketball player Allen Iverson and his tirade about we're talking about practice,
Yeah,
but with all the combination of the resources that you have at your disposal, if you're just willing to go and utilize those resources and then practice, like do mock interviews. You interviewing is something that the more you do it, the better you get. The more you do it, the better you get. And so if you just put in the time and do those things, utilize your resources, and then practice, you're just going to get better. And so that's what I try to tell students. Some people just feel like they can wing their way through it, but the best ones have been the ones that have taken advantage of the resources that they had at their disposal. And universities, colleges have so many resources and so many people that are willing to help them. I know what you did, and if a student came in and said, "Hey, I've got this interview," yeah, I mean, hey, let's talk about it. Here's some things, even questions. And now with technology, oh my gosh,
Yeah, yeah, you hit it on the head there. So I will.
you can find out just about anything, but practicing, is important. And also, again, utilizing the resources that you have all around you. You'll get better, much better at the interview process.
Yeah, and there's those cliches. What comes first, comfort or confidence?
Yeah.
And right, I think they come in tandem with the repetition, and that's what creates that level of confidence, which then allows you to be comfortable, whichever one comes first in your mind. But it is the repetition and the experience that allows both of those to flourish, in my opinion. Um, all right, well, this is the last opportunity that you have to impart all of the wisdom, all of your thoughts, all of your experiences into one culminating question. What advice specifically would you offer to anyone right now that is either looking to enter the workforce in a strong way or is maybe considering a career shift or a career change that would help them either gain that first role or make that switch with success?
One of the things that I've learned along the way, Chris, and what I would say to people is find a way to pursue something that you're passionate about. Find a way to pursue something that you're passionate about. It has literally been the story of my life. I was just a kid who loved sports. My mother told me to go outside and play, as a lot of mothers did back then. And in doing so, there was this whole world that I was exposed to of, fun and excitement through sports, watching my favorite players, going outside trying to emulate some of the things that my favorite players did, whether didn't matter what the sport was. And so if people can find something they are passionate about and pursue that. But then the other thing is, Chris, you gotta fall in love with it. And everybody's been in love before, but when you love something, you will do it the best that it can be done. And think about this. I say to students all the time, if you do something which goes back to my point about outworking everybody, if you do something to the best of your ability, if you become better than anybody else, it doesn't matter. Students always want to talk about, I want to make money. If you're the best at something, the money will find you when you're really good.
Mhm.
Do you realize that you can be the best person at eating hot dogs and you can make money at it? So
Millions, millions.
yes, you can make a lot of money. And whoever thought about that? But that person has become the best at that by finding something that you love to do and just falling in love with doing it. You will get better and better and better and utilizing some of the skills that we talked about earlier. And once you're really good at something, somehow the money finds a way to follow your level of talent. It just does.
And that is great advice. Find your passion, outwork everybody with a positive attitude and extreme effort, and all of the success, whether that's you're looking for recognition, money, or just that internal gratification, it will 100% find you. So, Dr. Mumford, thank you for joining us today for this episode of Classroom to Corner Office. Any final shout outs you want to give to anybody or anybody that's been along this path and journey that you want to give some of that recognition to?
I'll just say, like I said earlier, I want to thank you for having me on this podcast. Greatly appreciate it. It's a real honor to do this, and you know, uh, there have been so many people along the way. Nobody does anything by themselves, and if it wasn't for great role models, mentors, teachers. My mom was my greatest role model, but each, and this is how it's going to happen for any young person listening. At every level, at every fork in the road, you're going to have somebody there that's going to absolutely be there to guide you. You just got to be willing to listen because it's been those guardian angels at every step that have said, hey, you know, think about this opportunity I never knew existed. And, the person who, you know, whose whose mother's favorite TV was about a doctor wound up, and then as a kid, I'm playing sports outside watching my favorite player. And all of a sudden, my friends started calling me the doctor. And, in college, I would literally sign my papers, Vince Mumford, the doctor. Who knew? Who knew? I had no idea that I would eventually become a doctor. I didn't know. But hey, you find something that you love to do, and anything is possible if you're willing to put in the work.
So you
So,
you manifested that entirely, whether you realized it was happening or not. You got there.
well, hey, I think that through, like I said, none of us accomplish anything alone. And, it takes a village. And there's certainly, any young person who's willing to put in the time and effort and utilize the resources, anything is possible. Anything is possible.
There's the quote for the day, everybody. Anything is possible. Find that passion. So thank you again, Dr. Mumford, and everyone listening. Make sure that you tune in for the next episode of Classroom to Corner Office Career Talks with Chris.